Okay, Geometry, Chapter 3, Section 2, Parallel Lines and Transversals. So this takes the last section just to another level where those two lines that were intersected by the transversal will now be parallel instead of just going any direction. So I'm going to draw a set over here and draw a set of parallel lines. And then I'm going to write on the other side because I've been having difficulties getting this to respond over here, kind of like it's doing now, but that's okay because I won't be writing that much. And so there's my transversal. Again, transversal is just something that cuts through. And so that is forming all of these angles. Okay, so now I still have those same relationships. I have my corresponding, I have my alternate interior, I have my alternate exterior, and I also have my consecutive interior. But now we can actually assign values to them. Because when you have parallel lines and they're cut by a transversal, they're cut into 8 angles just like they were before. However, now a lot of those angles are congruent to each other. For example, let's start with what we started with in 3-1, which I believe was corresponding. And corresponding angles are congruent. Which means that angle 2 is congruent to angle 6, and angle 4 is congruent to angle 8. And now we go on the other side of the transversal, which means angle 1 is congruent to angle 5, and finally angle 3 is congruent to angle 7. Now we'll get an example here in just a minute and I'll show you how this works. But corresponding angles are congruent. And so go ahead and hit pause and get that one, and I want to move on to the next one. Okay, our next one was alternate interior. And alternate interior angles are also congruent. Which means angle 3 is congruent to angle 6, and angle 4 is congruent to angle 5. Again, those are my alternate interior angles. Inside the parallel lines, opposite sides of the transversal. So next we're going to get to alternate exterior angles. Alternate exterior angles are, guess what? They are congruent. Which means angle 1 is congruent to angle 8, and angle 2 is congruent to angle 7. Now remember, these weren't congruent yesterday because the lines weren't parallel. So that's what makes them congruent. We have to have parallel lines for these to be true. And so that'll leave us with our last one, which is going to be consecutive interior. And these are the only ones that aren't congruent. So consecutive interior angles are supplementary. Okay, so our consecutive interiors are supplementary. So angle 3 plus angle 5 equals 180 degrees. And angle 4 plus angle 6 equals 180 degrees. And so what does this look like? Well, let's say that I had just a plain Jane example here. Sorry about that. I had a phone call, so I'm not exactly sure where I was, but here we go. So we're going to get our parallel lines. Oh, we're going to do a little better there. We are going to cut them by a transversal. And I'm not going to number them this time. I'm just going to say that this one is 65 degrees. Actually, I will number them, but that will be number 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so I want you to find all 8 of the angles. Obviously, angle 2 is 65 degrees. What you will see here in just a second is that because we have a linear pair that's formed, all of our answers are just going to be 2 different angles. So the linear pair to 65 is going to be 115. And so angle 1 is 115 degrees. I got to put degrees on there. Well, we can look at vertical angles. If angle 2 is 65, then angle 3 is 65. If angle 1 is 115, then angle 4 is 115. Now let's use our consecutive, or let's use our alternate interiors. If angle 4 is 115, then angle 5 is the alternate interior, so it's also 115. If 3 is 65, then 6 is its alternate interior angle, so it is also 65. If 1 is 115, then 8 is its alternate exterior, so it is 115. If 2 is 65, then 7 is its alternate exterior, so it is also 65. So again, we only have 2 angles, 65 and 115. We just use our relationships of corresponding alternate interior, alternate exterior, and consecutive interior, even though we didn't use consecutive interior, because we can find all those without. But we might see something in the example later. So I'm going to go ahead and do one of those. So what if I had parallel lines cut by a transversal, and then let's see if I can find a consecutive interior. What if this was 72 and the other one was 7x plus 24? And I asked you to solve for x. Well, in this case, because they are consecutive interiors, we would take 7x plus 24, and we would add to that 72, and the relationship of consecutive interiors is that they are supplementary. So we will set that equal to 180 degrees. So I can combine like terms. That gives me 7x plus 96 equals 180. Then I would subtract 96. Oh, let's see. And that's going to give me 84. So 7x equals 84. Divide both sides by 7. And so x equals 12. Now I could sub that back in to find the other angle, or I could just subtract it from 180, subtract the 72 from 180 and get that as well. So again, because they were consecutive interiors, I went ahead and added them together and set them equal to 180. So that is Chapter 3, Section 2, Parallel Lines and Transversals.